All right, everyone. Welcome to the first official interview for the new Reflex Save series of interviews that does not currently have a title yet.
Working title. The series.
I am joined by esteemed and honourable guest Tim from smash hit podcast Reflex Save, who reprises the role of Horatio Cloudridge. Welcome, Tim.
Andrew, it is a pleasure to be here.
Well, straight off the bat, just in case for some reason someone's jumping in like 100 episodes or so into our recording, would you mind introducing yourself, just whatever you would like to disclose about yourself, anything at all?
Okay. So I was born and raised in Brisbane, Australia. Fun fact, I have 2 degrees. I have a music degree and I also have an engineering degree. I used to work as an engineer, currently studying to do cybersecurity. And that's me. And for Horatio, well, he's everyone's favourite surgeon turned cleric turned devout. And he's an interesting fellow. But yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks again for joining me here for this interview.
Thank you for coming to my house.
Hey, I thought this was my house.
Oh.
So you kind of touched on it a little bit. What are you currently doing with yourself outside of D&D? So you mentioned you were studying at the moment to get into cybersecurity. Do you have an IT background, or are you sort of advancing a current IT career, or are you looking to sort of break into the industry? What's the thought there?
Breaking into the industry. With my engineering background, I do have a fair degree of IT stuff that I've done, but nothing official. And with the IT world being as it is, it needs to be official. So you need work experience, or you need certificates and certifications and all that stuff. So that's what I'm working towards with my grad certificate. And then from there, I'll probably do a couple other certifications to try and transition into the industry.
Nice. So I thought with this interview, we might keep it a little bit spicy, keep it fresh.
We always do.
So I will be starting with a couple of sort of open-ended questions, and then I would like to get into a speed round where I'm going to ask you just a bunch of questions, and I want you to answer just literally whatever the first thing that comes to your head is. I mean, you can like think about it if you want, but they're not overly important or significant questions, but just whatever comes to your head. And then, so I'll put a couple of speed rounds in every so often just to keep you on your toes.
I like it. Bring it on.
Tell me a little bit about your creation of Horatio. So, obviously, Cleric of Kelemvor. Was there any inspiration you took there, like anything you referenced from, or what did you have in mind when you were creating the character for Reflex Save?
I think the train of thought, I started at healer. And I remember running by Callan, because I think we all went through this process where we sort of all secretly had a chat with him just to make sure there was no huge overlap in terms of classes. Like, as much as I'd love to see a party of 4 healers, it's probably not going to be much fun to listen to. And, not very effective in combat. It's obviously possible and be a bit of fun, but maybe not for this. So once I got the green light from Callan to do a healer, I started to think about... I actually spent a lot of time on... And this sort of goes for all of my characters that I create. I spend a lot of time looking up portraits and just looking up like fantasy characters, because I get a lot of inspiration from just their appearance.
So more of a visual thing that
you
kind
absolutely.
of like see something and it like might create a story in your head, or like you just sort of can picture the character behind the portrait.
Both. So I draw a lot of it, like I said, a lot of inspiration from actually seeing what they look like. And I remember seeing this picture that he looked kind of like a surgeon, or In fact, I think actually I got a lot of inspiration from, what's his name? I think Jonathan something or other. Someone help me out. He was the main character in the game Vampire.
Okay.
But,
Pause for Googling.
okay. Jonathan Reed. He's a doctor who turned into a vampire.
Okay, so he's like a sort of a gritty, like a bit of dark themes there.
Yeah, he's actually kind of torn, but in a different way, because he is a vampire, and he's sort of having to deal with like his bloodlust, but also like his Hippocratic oath kind of thing. So he doesn't want to kill people, but he also needs to feed. So it's quite an interesting dynamic. And I drew a lot of inspiration from him, both in terms of that dynamic, you know, with the heart physician, and then like a challenging ideal that comes along. And also his appearance too. I think I borrowed heavily from that, like a sort of, what would you say, like a very sort of serious, solemn sort of character, you know, and the beard, of course. And yeah, I think he was like probably my main source of inspiration. The whole thing with him being like religious and going against his surgeon background, I think a lot of that sort of came from him having to have like a D&D class. Like, obviously a healer, you're going to be a cleric most likely. And so with the cleric, they are like a devout follower of some religion, typically. And so that's kind of where that dynamic came from, almost out of necessity, I suppose, with him being a cleric, but also being a surgeon. So I think it was around those sorts of thoughts that I had. That's pretty much where I came up with the dynamic, and his development from there has all just been on the go. Like I hadn't really planned out how he was going to develop beyond. He had been put into this world trying to improve his healing skills, and that's where he entered the world. And then what happened from there and how he developed, that's just been sort of ongoing through the podcast.
Yeah, so you kind of like, so Horatio's story is sort of unfolding with the story of the rest of the party, and drawing sort of influence and background from like the party and what's going on in Icewind Dale. Yeah,
for sure. This is all new experiences for him. Experiences with new people, new location. He's never been in such a harsh climate. And new experiences with his deity, Kellenvor, Special K, the one and only.
Special K.
So his experiences with that as well, it sort of shaped him, I think, a lot.
Okay. I know when I played with you in other D&D campaigns, so I believe you're, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you're quite similar to me in when you're making characters, you sort of come up with an idea and then find a way, like find classes and subclasses and races that can fit to sort of your concept for a character, rather than building, you know, I want to play a monk, and then coming up with a plot and a character around that. Is that, would you say that's true?
Yeah, definitely. I like to come up with the idea first and then go into the player's handbook and see, you know, what would make that happen. I very rarely start a character out in the player's handbook. It's usually I'll think of some cool or interesting character, just like Jonathan Reed from Vampire, or some other character like that, and then I'll say, well, you know, how can I turn this into a D&D character? And then I'll start to look, okay, well, cleric obviously work for a healer, you know, he's a surgeon. But yeah, obviously going backwards, if you like, starting with the idea and then seeing what it fit.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. And you have chosen to play a healer, and I also know that your main class in Final Fantasy XIV is a healing class.
It's true, yeah.
Is this a trend? Like, would you say that a cleric is like a go-to for you? Do you like classes that do have a bit of healing and lean into that religious element, or like is that did you just wanted to give it a go? Or
I don't know. I haven't really thought of that. That's an excellent question. And yes, I play Final Fantasy XIV a lot, and yes, my main is a healer, a white mage, and I like it. I don't like... In terms of Final Fantasy, we'll just talk Final Fantasy for a sec. Your DPS classes, I think they're a good place to start. And I'm talking in terms of good, like, group content, right? They're a good starting point if you just want, like, a simple job. All you need to do is go in there and hit the bad guys on the head as hard as you can, right? That's a bit of a simplification, but that's generally the idea. Tanks, probably at the opposite end of the spectrum, especially in Final Fantasy. They're pretty much, they sort of manage the party, control all the monsters to try and draw all the aggro to stop, everyone else getting hit and wiped. And the healers sort of fit somewhere in between. They have a lot of responsibility. They do keep you busy, but for me at least, I don't find the stakes as high. I find it quite stressful to play a tank in group content. There's a lot of pressure on you, and you really need to know what you're doing. And I don't really play Final Fantasy like as a hardcore group player, so I feel like for me, being a healer gives me enough to do, keeps me busy, gives me enough responsibility that I'm feeling challenged. I just think it strikes that good balance. I don't particularly like playing a DPS. I think they're nice. They're obviously they're like a default choice in a way. But I do like having a bit more to do without being overwhelmed. I'm not really sure if that ties into my choice for a healer with reflex save. I haven't never really thought about that. I feel like it's just a coincidence, actually, because we chose our characters for reflex save over 2 years ago now, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, probably just over 2 years.
So yeah, I think because I've only been playing Final Fantasy XIV like regularly I have played it on and off in the past, but I've only really picked it up regularly maybe a year ago. So I think it's just a coincidence because I haven't really played healers that much in the past.
Okay, right, and you've dove right in. Because clerics are quite involved. Like, they have a lot of features, a lot of different spells that, rely on knowledge of good and evil in D&D, of, like, resistances and that sort of thing. So it's quite a difficult one to play for... I mean, I don't think any of us have done any any recorded podcasts before, or even been, like, taken any D&D games, like... super seriously, so it was a brave move going a cleric to your first one.
Yeah, and I can definitely assure you that there's been many features and opportunities to use the mist, but slowly working out how it all goes together.
Well, you've sort of covered a few of my, or one or two of my other questions in there. So you've arrived at your first speed round, actually. So, now, like I said, just whatever comes to your head first. If you don't have an answer, just say the first thing that comes to your head.
Okay.
All right. Question 1, how many?
10.
PC or console?
PC.
What is the worst vegetable?
Asparagus.
Enclosed shoes on the beach, yes or no?
No.
Best Ninja Turtle?
Donatello.
Ooh. Favorite type of graph or chart?
Spreadsheet. Next.
Your favorite superhero?
Superman.
Greatest all-time Pokemon starter?
Charmander.
Good call. All right, that ends speed round number 1.
Thank you.
Good answers.
I like that.
You had actually a lot of similar answers to me.
I'm not surprised. We're pretty much on the same wavelength.
Yeah. I mean, asparagus is the worst vegetable. I'm not sure about that. I love asparagus.
Okay. We can't be the same person.
No. Well, I guess when we go to dinner, I'll eat your asparagus and...
All right. You just take it off my plate. It's yours.
I will. Okay. Back to the more serious line of questioning. You're very well known on the podcast for regularly saying, if you work hard and play by the rules, this country is truly open to you. You can achieve anything. What do you mean by that?
First of all, do I? I mean, I'm happy to answer your question, but I'm not sure if I did.
I might be mixing you up with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, I mean, I do quote him regularly. So if you work hard and play by the rules, you can do anything.
Pretty much, yeah. You can achieve anything.
Yeah, I agree. Yep, I think Horatio, well...
He definitely plays by the rules.
Yeah, well, which rules is the interesting part for him. I think his rule set's changed throughout the podcast, but he definitely plays by them. He follows whatever rules he's playing by, he definitely follows them hard.
And he is a hard worker.
Yeah, if his mind's set to something like he wants to help someone or someone's in need, yeah, he's just laser focus. He's straight onto it.
Okay, so there were 2 questions that I gave to you before this interview. The rest are new to you, and you're hearing them for the first time right now. But we've now arrived at the 2 questions that I did let you plan a little bit for in advance.
My open book questions.
Yes. So, question 1, if you could change one thing about D&D, what would it be and how?
Let me start by saying that this is an excellent question.
Thanks.
I thought quite a while about this, and my train of thought brought me to issues in general with the game of D&D. And I started thinking, accessibility to new players. And then again, 5th edition was all about making it more accessible. And I think it's done an excellent job of that. I think... I see, that's the thing. I still feel like something I would change would be to somehow make it even more accessible. I feel like, well, when I say more accessible, I mean in particular to people who don't have any background in board games or computer, PC, console, anything like that, because I still feel like there's a lot of concepts in D&D that gamers in general just take for granted. Things like HP, XP, things like that. Even maybe the concept of movement. But if people who don't play video games or maybe don't have any experience with board games, they're still pretty foreign concepts. And even though it's been simplified, quite a bit, it's still a lot of foreign concepts for someone to take on in one go. I feel like if there was one thing I could change, I might try to do some kind of there's probably already 1,000 things out there like this, I just haven't seen them, but I'd probably do some kind of 1 or 2 page, just, what would you call it, like a cheat sheet, like a quick guide, and then to go with that, I might have the layout of the character sheet. And then for each section would just be coloured in as a block diagram. So you might have this rectangular block that just says abilities. You might have a little box up the top that says saving throws. And the purpose of this chart is that, in my own experience especially, when I've played with people who, like I say, don't have that background in gaming or any board games or anything, it's very hard for them to find things quickly on the character sheet. The character sheet's broken up, I think, very well and quite efficiently, but it's still a lot of information to be put on someone in one go.
Yeah. And
there's been many situations where you've said to someone make me an athletics check, and then they'll be athletics, where's that? Or make me a dexterity saving throw, what's the saving throw, whereabouts on the sheet's that. So I think if they have that little quick guide and a block diagram, they're oh, here's the skill checks, oh, that's the saving throws up there, things like that. And even at the start of combat, there's been many an occasion where people are what's my initiative?
Yeah.
Even though it's a big number up the top of it's a big number right at the top. Always people ask, what is my initiative? So to me, it just seems like people without that background, it's a lot of stuff put on the page in one go, and I think that's still a big hurdle for raw beginners to overcome.
Yeah.
So I think I've kind of answered how I change it as well. I would come up with some kind of block, probably two things, like a 1 or 2 page quick guide, like just to remind people, because it's one thing to say to everyone, these are your skills, so when someone asks you, do a check, roll your dice and then check your modifier, but it's a lot for people to take in one go, so obviously a lot of it's going to be forgotten. So by having that quick reference, like what is a skill check for? Oh yeah, that's right. And then you've got your little block diagram, like where's initiative? Oh, it's up there. Oh, where's the skill checks? Oh, that's this big rectangle here. Things like that. And I think it would speed up the process of familiarization. I think that familiarization does come eventually, but I feel like this would lower the hurdle to reach that point a little bit.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. So for those listening, Tim and I are also in another campaign together that I'm actually running, and it's a 6-player party. Only Tim of those has played D&D at all before this campaign. So combats for us can be a lot longer than they probably need to be. All right, so the next question. And this is one that I blatantly just stole from Reddit, but I thought it was a great question, and I enjoyed thinking about it. And even this afternoon was going over it again and thinking about, like what I would respond to this. But this is in my interview. So, Tim, if you could change feet to miles for one D&D spell or ability, how are you ruining your GM's day?
I thought a while about this one too, but I think my answer is probably a little... I think it'd ruin their day, but it's not very creative. And the answer I came up with was the spell Fireball. I feel like, because I read the rules too, and it says you can choose a location within 150 feet. It doesn't say you need to see it. So if you know a location within 150 miles of where you are, you can drop a fireball with a diameter of 20 miles.
So it's like not a very tactical nuke. It's just a nuke.
Just a nuke, yeah. So things that can catch fire set fire. So you're basically burning down an entire village because the radius is 20 miles. And it's actually a sphere of radius 20 miles. So it goes 20 miles up and down. So it's a nuke. The other one I considered was maybe like detect thoughts. And then seeing how the DM manages your descent into madness, but the thing with that is I think you need to be able to see them. But if not, you can listen into people a long way away. I think it's 30 miles or something. 30. You can see feet. Within 30 feet, so 30 miles. Yeah. So I mean, if you're legless, you might be able to listen in on someone who's 30 miles away, but yeah, Fireball would be an absolute hoot, I reckon. Yeah.
You could take down an entire, Knoll camp or, entire dungeon just with one long-range nuke.
Oh, yeah. It would be more than that. It would be, an entire city or, an entire region. Because it's 20-mile radius, so it's, 40 miles in diameter. So that's a huge area. So yes, that's how I would ruin my GM's day.
Alright, and speaking of GMs, I've played with you in both roles at the D&D table. Do you prefer being a player or a GM?
I like both, and I think it comes down... Yeah, I think a lot of it is to do with the level of responsibility I feel like taking on for that occasion. Obviously, being a GM is a huge amount of responsibility compared to being a player. And I also think it's a different playing style. I think as a player, certainly after you've played it a little bit, maybe a year or so, it becomes... a lot of it becomes automatic, and then you can sort of really relax and take it easy. And it's just, mucking around a little bit within reason, but just having a good time, right? You don't have to worry about stuff. But as a GM, you can still have a good time, and maybe I'm speaking due to lack of experience, because I haven't done a lot of GMing, so for me it can be a little bit stressful, and you do have a lot of responsibilities you have to consider, because you're basically responsible for 4, 5, 6 people at the table. They're all trying to have a good time too, and you've got a lot to worry about on top of that. I wouldn't say it takes the fun away, but I would say it makes it a different kind of fun.
Yeah.
I feel like it's much more satisfying on a deeper level, but it probably doesn't have the same degree of like surface level fun, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Mucking around, having a good time, not worrying, yeah.
Yeah, like if you have a good session, you just feel so good about it, and like you can like think back on it and just know how much your players enjoyed it. But yeah, it's exhausting. There's a lot to think about. Like it's not as fun in the moment, but I find it's more rewarding.
Absolutely, it's much more rewarding. Yeah, and like you said, like a GM might feel really good about a session. The really good role play. That was a really clever thing that Jimmy did. But then, if you go to Jimmy's point of view, he's like, "Yeah, I blew up a door. Yeah, it was great." And that's his experience, from his perspective.
Jimmy hates doors.
I don't know what his problem is. Jimmy hates them. So yeah, I do enjoy it, but I also feel like in a similar way to being a player, I think a lot of those nerves and responsibilities, worrying about that stuff, I think gets lessened over time. The more that we would do it, I think in a similar way to being a player. I remember the first few times we were a player, it was pretty nerve-wracking, because I'd never played D&D before, and it was completely new to me, and I didn't really know what was going on.
And you didn't know the people either.
No, I didn't know anyone except you. But now playing D&D, it's just like, I don't want to say riding a bike, but it is the same. You do go through the same motions every time. In a way, I think no matter what the scenario is, the campaign, the setting, or anything, because, and this may change if we change to a different system, but because we've been playing 5th edition, it's always the same basic framework every time. So you just get used to that framework, and then the bits on top, like the setting and all that, becomes the new and interesting part.
So on your GMing style, would you consider yourself more a meticulous planner? Are you more of an improv guy? You just sort of roll with the punches? Like, how much do you prepare before you're going to be running a module?
I feel like when I first started out, I was very much on the meticulous planning side. I think the reason for that was because of lack of experience. I was worried that there might be situations that I wouldn't be able to handle gracefully, or situations where I might not be able to make, what I consider a fair judgment on the spot. Maybe in hindsight I could, but in the moment, could I? So I think I tried to prepare way too much. It's funny, it's actually ironic in a way, because I remember I've always wanted to let players do whatever they want, and I encourage them to. But at the same time, those first few sessions that I used to run were not railroaded, but I was writing out what I anticipated what they would do in advance, so I was prepared for it. And now that I have been a GM a few times, that's just a recipe for disaster. You can write out what you think people are going to do, but they never will. That's the only constant that I've learned. So I found that because I was in these first couple of sessions that I ran, I was leaning so heavily into this narrative that I'd already created in my head that I think I was almost expecting that. I was overthinking it, and because I wanted to see that narrative pan out, I was planning around that narrative, and I wasn't allowing enough leeway if someone comes along and wants to do something random or crazy, which is what makes D&D fun. But since those early sessions where I overplanned it, I'm much more on the fly, improvised now. I have a couple of sort of key things that I might want to touch on, or if it's like a dungeon, I might have... With a dungeon, actually, the most recent one I ran was for a board game group with high school friends that I'm a part of called Boardies. Those boys have been playing D&D, very on and off for probably nearly 2 years as well, actually, which is scary. I actually wrote a dungeon for them because I got a set of tactical maps. And it's in a similar way. I created this dungeon in a similar way that I might look at a portrait and come up with inspiration. Anyway, so I put together this dungeon, but instead of having to try and put together a narrative like how they were going to go through it, what was going to happen in order, I just put together, this is locate this room, this is what's in here, this is this room, what's in here, and just let them go about it. And sure enough, they didn't go through it how I thought they would, which is kind of what I expect now. But it didn't matter because I just had the rooms and I just laid them out for them and they just did their own thing. So yeah, much more preparing what's there, but not preparing where I think it'll go.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
And then that's, I think, where the fun part starts. And also, I think that, for me at least, that's because, I can sort of improvise stuff on the fly. And that certainly gets easier, I think, and will continue to get easier if I keep GMing as well. I think that's a skill that you just sort of develop by doing it over and over again. And that kind of stuff just sort of comes. And in a strange way, I think it actually requires less preparation. By having less preparation but sticking to what's there rather than where it's going to go, I think it also makes it a bit less stressful as well, because you're not worrying about where they're going and is that following the story that you had in your mind? And rather than just taking a step back and being a spectator who knows what everything is around them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
But, ask me again in a year, and that might change again.
Yeah,
but that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, speed round number 2.
Oh, fuck.
Okay, are you ready for this?
Oh, yep.
Here we go. Rice or noodles?
Noodles.
Soft pillow or hard pillow?
Soft pillow.
Favorite dinosaur?
T-Rex.
In Tolkien's Middle-earth, are elves assholes?
Yes.
What do you put on your toast?
Peanut butter.
You're in the car, you're on your way to work. What are you listening to, music-wise or audio-wise?
J-pop.
Okay. That was it.
There you go.
Short and sweet.
Welcome to my life, internet.
And so we have, I think we're pretty close to running out of time now. So I will wrap up by asking you, what advice do you wish you received when you first started playing D&D? Or, and you can answer either, what advice would you give to a new player?
I'd frame it in advice to a new player. I don't like to think back and say, oh, I wish I'd known this, because that way of thinking isn't very constructive. I think I would do it looking forward to a new player who I might come across. I'd tell them, don't sweat the details. Don't worry about what happens, because it doesn't matter what happens. I think the point of being there is not to achieve, or I should say the only point of being there and the only goal that you should be trying to achieve is having fun with your friends. That what actually happens is almost irrelevant. I mean, I'm going to say you're the perfect example, Andrew, because your rolling is so bad. Like, I don't even know how to justify it. I'm not sure what you did in a past life to deserve this treatment.
So many evils.
So many evils. But it doesn't matter, because rolling really high might feel good sometimes, but that's not why we play. You can feel just as good and even have more fun if you roll terribly, because it just changes the direction that the story goes in. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's just a story that you experience with your friends. So I would say don't get too caught up in the fine details. Don't worry about your character if you've forgotten stuff. And when you're creating your character, don't worry if they're not perfect. They rarely are. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter anyway. And don't forget that you're there to have fun with your friends. So don't focus so heavily on the perfect character or anything like that, and don't go into it with big expectations as well. I think keeping an open mind and a light heart is probably all you really need to have a good time.
Well, what a beautiful sentiment to wrap up on. Get out of my house.
Okay, I will get out of my house now. And thanks for the interview, Andrew. That was really nice to talk about these.
No worries. Hope you had fun.
Look forward to interviewing you. Mwah. Bye.
Bye.
Are you looking for an actual play podcast with young, hot role players, disciplined professional voice actors, and wholesome content? Well, this isn't that podcast. AARPG is an adults-only podcast with interviews, actual play stories where...
Excuse me, Matt, why do you sound like you've been chain smoking since you were a toddler?
What do you mean?
The voice. You don't have to do that voice, man.
I don't?
Nah, just tell them that we're a group of old friends who like to get together, hang out, play lots of different types of games, and we want them to feel like they're sitting at the table with us. And they can find us just by searching for the AARPG podcast on their favorite podcatcher and at the AARPGs on YouTube.